Supply chain is the engine that powers commerce, and as a result of the disruption we've seen over the past few years and the continued disruption we will see moving forward, supply chains will transform, and people are the most important ingredient to make it happen. I've packaged 20 years of my supply chain hindsight and 20 years of my supply chain foresight into a single framework to help adjust your mindset to unlock your true supply chain potential that is going to be critical in transforming supply chain, commerce, and the world.
The Supply Web framework will help you think about supply chains more broadly and help you navigate them to focus on the important things moving forward. Think of it as your supply chain compass that will help orient you as you practice supply chain. I'll break the framework up so you know how to put it to use. Let's start with the frame. Before you have any interaction or project around supply chain, make sure you've got a really good understanding of the scope. And scope could be an individual product, it could be a region, or it could be a group of customers, for example.
Don't underestimate this trivial step. It's amazing how often people jump headfirst into a discussion or a problem or a solution without gaining that all-important alignment on scope. So frame supply chain and start there.
Supply chains are made up of a handful of critical activities, and they are all as important as each other. Generally, there are 5 activities, and these are the anchors that hold your supply chain together. Right at the top, and just the tip of the iceberg, is processing. These are the facilities that are stocking, producing, or transforming products. And at the very foundation of your supply chain is supply and demand. Demand being the market needs, and supply being the product ingredients. And the vehicle that keeps your supply chain moving is logistics. Inbound logistics is the transfer of product supply into the processing facilities, and outbound logistics is the transfer of products out of the processing facilities to fulfill your product demand.
Your supply chain can't function if one of your anchors breaks. So understand the 5 anchors and the purpose that they serve, and importantly, the impact if they break.
Based on the role you play in the supply chain, your perspective will be very different. Understand all 3 primary perspectives to maximize your overall understanding of the supply chain. Processing is an internal view and focused on the things that typically occur within your own 4 walls of your processing facilities, like inventory, manufacturing, and quality. Supply and demand side are external views and focused on things like forecasts, orders, shipments, and invoices. When you start thinking about things in these 3 perspectives, it removes a lot of the confusion that can occur in your professional interactions. For this reason, I've created a subject area reference guide to help with that, so you can clearly understand which perspectives a supply chain subject area belongs to. There is a pretty definitive line on what subject areas belong to processing and which belong to demand and supply sides. The demand and supply side activities are essentially the same thing, and a supplier's demand side should equal a customer's supply side.
When you organise your thoughts into the 3 perspectives and know which subject areas belong to which, it leads to a much more efficient and productive conversation. Doing this will increase your confidence and help you drive your professional interactions with maximum results.
Now we can split the framework into 3 distinct functional areas that need to work together to keep the supply chain running. Operations makes sure processing facilities are functioning, and this expands into supply-side operations like receiving product and accounts payable, and demand-side operations like shipping products and accounts receivable. Logistics makes sure products are moving through the supply chain, both inbound and outbound, and between processing facilities. And planning and execution make sure the right products are at the right place at the right time.
Supply chain is an orchestra of activities. Everyone plays a role, no matter how big or how small. You need to understand and help all these functions work together. Break silos and collaborate.
So now that we've defined the scope and the process related elements, we can now look at the zones of the actual supply web. The outer zone of the supply web are products. These are the things that move through the process, and you're going to have to know as much as you can about the products, what they consist of, how they were processed, and what they ultimately end up as.
You need to know more about the products that you're moving through your supply chain than ever before. And about 70% of the information you need does not even exist in a structured form in your company's information systems. We need to reduce that gap. Next, products cannot exist without healthy ecosystems.
The inner zone of the supply web are the ecosystems. These are the companies and organizations that are touching and moving products through the process. Know as much as you can about the ecosystems that make up your supply web, who they are, and also what relationships those companies have with other companies.
You need to know more about the ecosystems that handle product in your supply chain than ever before. And about 80% of the information you need does not even exist in a structured form in your company's information systems. We need to reduce that gap. Next, ecosystems cannot exist without healthy environments.
Right in the middle, the hub zone of your supply web are the environments. And these are the geopolitical and socio-economic environments that host the ecosystems. Know as much as you can about the environments that make up your supply web. Keeping on top of things like international relations and trade agreements and politics are extremely important to the resilience and the harmonization of your supply web.
You need to know more about the environments that host your ecosystems in your supply chain than ever before. About 90% of the information you need does not even exist in a structured format in your company's information systems. We need to reduce that gap. When the environment is disrupted, the entire supply web collapses. The operating environment that hosts your ecosystems is the single most important part of the supply web. Period.
There are 10 things you need to be thinking about to promote the health and harmonization of the supply web. I call these threads because they thread through all 3 zones of the supply web. I created a reference guide that helps explain these 10 imperatives. As we move forward, it is imperative that the products that are moving through the supply web and the ecosystems that are handling those products and the environments that are hosting those ecosystems are aligned to the overall needs of our supply chain, that they're compliant, that we know as much about them as we can, we know their relationships, we understand and build resiliency, that they're responsible and secure and sustainable, and we understand the technologies that are used through the processes, and we have transparency to information and data.
Working on the health and the harmonisation of the supply web is critical to the long-term viability of your supply chains. And harmonisation is the biggest opportunity that exists in the next 20 years as we transform supply chains and commerce.
So now that you've understood the supply web through the lens of one tier of the supply chain, you need to start understanding more about the upstream and the downstream tiers. The tiers seamlessly connect together like Lego blocks. So the demand side operations of one tier connects to the supply side operations of the next tier. The outbound logistics of one tier connects to the inbound logistics of the next tier. And fundamentally, the demand of one tier connects to the supply of the next tier.
With so many activities, perspectives, products, ecosystems, environments, functions, and tiers, the supply web is the epitome of orchestration. The supply web is complex, but when decoded, it's truly spectacular, and therefore it's never been a better time to be a supply chain professional. I built the supply web framework for you to help you succeed in the next 20 years of transformation. It is people that will power the supply web, and it is the supply web that will power commerce, and it is commerce that will power the world.